you are listening to the Kinetic Man podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
And one of the things that David and I love most about podcasting is the incredible conversations and the advice that we get from our guests. Honestly, I truly believe it's the one thing that has made the most impact on me for my personal growth. And what you may not realize is that David and I oftentimes get a ton of free advice before and after the show, spanning from different topics between investing, parenting advice, how to create an epic marriage, health, tips and tricks, and much, much more. Unfortunately for you listeners, we've been a bit selfish and we haven't shared all of that sage advice with you guys, but that's coming to an end. Over the past 3 months, we've started to ask and record this one question to all of our podcast guests. What is the one action step that you recommend taking to level up in your business and in your personal life? And the answers have been life-changing. So the question is, would you be interested in hearing those same answers? We're calling it Leveling Up with TKM, and we want to share it with you. Only for $2 a month, you'll get 4 recorded videos every month in your inbox with those answers to the question that we just asked. And here's how you get it. Go to thekineticman.com/level up. Again, that's thekineticman.com/level up. Sign up today, get those videos, and go take uncommon action. So before we hit the record button, we were talking about snow and living in the Rockies. And Mike, you just told us something that was pretty exciting to me, living in a place where there's lots of snow and there's lots of mountain playing. And I know you do a lot of that now, but I'm excited about having you on, man. I appreciate you reaching out, and I've looked a lot into what you do and had some great conversations with you on the phone, and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, likewise.
If you could, man, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I mean, so many different roles that I inhabit. Husband, father of 3 kids. My official role with my company is chief explorer with Wayfinders, and community leader, and I guess seeker would be one of those things. You know, my growth and my evolution is kind of top of the priority list, because that affects all those other roles. So I'm constantly looking to push myself and understand myself better and grow and evolve, and then also have a ton of fun while I'm doing a lot of these things as well, whether it's with my kids or my community or all this other stuff. As Oscar Wilde was fond of saying, life's too important to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I love that, man. And we spoke over email first and then jumped on a phone call, and our conversation really spoke to me. And if you could go back a little bit and kind of tell me, this mindset of yours of having fun and adventure and chief explorer and all these ideas, has that always been the case? Or where did your kind of roots start in business, and what was that journey like along the way? Like where did you start in business?
Well, if you want me to go, really far back, I could probably trace it back to my first paper route. But maybe I'll start at a little more salient point. The town we were talking about, the little ski town in the Canadian Rockies, Fernie. I moved there right after university, and it was really just a move of, I graduated with a degree in history and economics. I didn't know what I was going to do with either of those things. I knew I didn't want to wear a suit to work, and I just wanted to move to the Rockies, be in the mountains, do some skiing, have some fun, be a ski bum for a year, and then I'd figure it out. And about, I want to say 5 months into my time in Fernie, I got fired from my 3rd job in a row. And that was when I realized that my future probably didn't involve working for others, because I wasn't very good at it. And, when you're in a town of 6,000 people and you get fired from your 3rd job, word kind of gets around quick. And so I just thought my job prospects are pretty low here. And I was just walking along. There's this trail by the Elk River in Fernie. I was just walking along there with a friend, kind of feeling a little despondent, like, oh, what the hell am I going to do now? And he said to me, well, you love mountain biking, and there's this amazing trail network here, and it's kind of hard to navigate, and there's more and more tourists coming here. Like, why don't you just take people out on the trails and guide them around, and maybe somebody will give you some money for it? And I sat on that for a couple of days, waffling back and forth between that's a really stupid idea and that's an amazing idea. And I decided, what the hell, I'm going to go for it. And I managed to convince another friend of mine to join me on this venture. And we wrote a business plan. We took it to this organization called Futures Development Corporation. They gave us a $10,000 loan to get started. We used most of that to buy a fleet of rental bikes. We also got a sign that we hung on the highway and printed up a few brochures. And our first summer, we had a grand total of one customer. And mind you, that was the guiding part of it. We managed to rent enough bikes over the course of the summer that it was enough to keep us going. But that one customer was really the pivotal point, because that came, well into the summer. And we're like, I don't know, maybe nobody wants to pay us for this. I ended up taking this guy out. I think he paid us like $80, something like that for the day. And I just could not get the grin off my face, because I could not believe that somebody was paying me to ride my bike in the Rockies. And it was like, this is the greatest day of my life. I'm getting paid to ride my mountain bike in these spectacular mountains. And that was kind of all I needed. And my partner ended up leaving around year 4 to become a chiropractor, but I stuck with it. Eventually ended up scaling that business. We started running overnight trips and trips throughout British Columbia, but then eventually all over the world. Went down to Peru. That was our first international trip. That was just, mind blowing, seeing this confluence of mountain biking and an amazing mountain bike experience. Like, the trails there are incredible, but also this really rich travel experience as well. And that came about 10 years in, and that was sort of the key that unlocked the next phase of growth, because I was getting a little bit tired of just running the same trips in BC. And that was the spark that led to, 12, 13 years of rapid expansion all over the world. And yeah, really grateful for my time with that company. I ended up selling it about 4.5 years ago.
Just out of curiosity, when you say, scaling and you were growing that business, yeah, my entrepreneur radar is going off, because it's awesome. But were you effectively selling the trips and the experience you were taking, gathering folks, and the premise of it was a mountain biking adventure to, a far off place, and so that's what you were selling? Or was it like a franchise model and there were other people in other places and you were kind of providing a model and they were doing it? Or was this you actively going to all these places?
Yeah, yeah, very good question. Um, so the scale part, this was the really difficult nut to crack, because there was you can either go and invest a whole bunch of time and money and effort in setting up trips yourself. So you need things like, you need a van, you need a trailer to transport gear and bikes, stuff like that. You need to find guides, you need to hire them and train them. You need to get all the permits, you need to secure the relationships with the suppliers, the hotels, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot of work. The the payoff for all that work is that you get higher margins, you get high degree of control over the experience, because it's your own thing. The other thing that we did was we often subcontracted local companies, and these are typically companies that are only offering trips in their local area. They have a ton of expertise. They have all the infrastructure, the gear, and all that kind of stuff. The downside of that model is that your margins are lower. That they need to make their money, and you also have less control over the experience. And then we would get them to wear our jerseys and put our branding on their vehicles and stuff like that. Inevitably, when somebody spends 10 days, or 7 days or 8 days with some guides in Peru or some other country, they're going to find out that they've got their own company. And so you run that risk of, if people want to go back or want to refer their friends, they're not going to refer them to you. They're going to refer them to the local company. So one of the things I did, and you touched on it there with this franchise model, is we launched a franchise model. And the idea was, if you're in, I think our first franchisee was in Nepal, this guy Mandil, and he reached out to us and he said, "Hey, like, I have extensive knowledge of the trails in this area. I would love to be part of your organization." We developed this franchise model where they pay a fee up front, and then we do all the booking and handle all the, all the marketing and the booking and all that kind of stuff, and they operate the trips, and then we take a small royalty off of that. So we had, when I left the company, we had all these various models. Uh, from the customer standpoint, it all looked the same, but it was very different operating models, and it was a lot of complexity to manage all these different models. And then we ended up launching this whole other kind of software side of the business with this kind of like an Airbnb platform. So if you're in like, in the French Alps or something like that, and you want to run trips under the Sacred Rides brand, you could become part of this program and you can run day and 2 day trips under this, Airbnb software platform. I ended up leaving before that really took flight, but yeah, it was fun. I experimented with a whole bunch of different stuff, and it's a tough, very competitive industry to operate, and I was pretty proud of we managed to stake out kind of the top position in the market, and yeah, it was fun while it lasted.
It was fun while it lasted, but that's not what you're doing now, though. Um, what was that transition to what you're doing now in Wayfinders, and what is Wayfinders?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit of context. Going back to, I think, 2013 was the first time I brought investors on to my previous company, Sacred Rides. Did it again in 2014 and again in 2016, and really expanded, the company all over the world. And and as I started, pushing my foot on the gas for a number of years, I also had young kids at the time. I was getting increasingly more and more burnt out. And I was doing more and more things that I really didn't want to be doing, like writing shareholder reports and, dealing with banks and lawyers and all this kind of stuff. And I remember one day waking up being like, what the hell am I doing? Like I started a mountain bike company and I'm spending my time writing reports to shareholders and looking over, bank documents, stuff like that. And I realized, at that point I'd been running the company almost 20 years, and I started actually scaling back and pulling myself out of the company, and just handing as much as I could over to my staff and automating things and stuff like that because I was just a little bit burnt out at that point. At the same time, I was also, joining all these different groups like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and going to these different conferences and stuff like that because I was encountering all sorts of things that I wasn't qualified for. I'd never scaled a business that size and that rapidly. And um, and so a lot of these conferences that I went to, I got a lot of great information. There were great speakers, great workshops, stuff like that. But the value I got was the connections that I made with people there. And typically the format was not great for that, right? It's hard to have a conversation when there's a speaker on stage blathering on for an hour. And so I knew, from my company that when people are outside, when they're riding bikes, when they're hiking, when they're challenging themselves in a group, they tend to forge connections quickly. And so I thought, I think I can take a better approach to this because I knew from talking to the other people in the network that the value that they got was the people they connected with. So it wasn't meant to be a business. I just decided to put together a 5 day event, and it was actually in Fernie at this cat skiing lodge just outside of town. And I said, "Hey, I'm getting some entrepreneurs together. We're going to ride bikes. We're going to hike. We're going to raft. We're going to have fun. We'll also have we'll have some content on business stuff." And just sent it out to my network and sold out like that. People loved the idea. Um, that event went super well. People asked me to do more of them. Long story short, I ended up, there were a couple of years of overlap where I was running events for Wayfinders and still running my old company. I ended up selling that in early 2019, and focusing exclusively on Wayfinders. And now I take a little bit of a different approach where I take people to really, really far away, remote places. I just got back from Western Mongolia. I'm heading to Ecuador. We're going to scale a 20,000-foot volcano there. And, it's really about pushing ourselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, and creating this context for a community journey where the adventure is a big part of it, but it's also about discovering something about yourself and connecting with an amazing group of people. So, yeah, I've been doing this is now coming up on, geez, what is it, 7 years, something like that. I've been doing it and couldn't love it more.
Yeah, that's and anybody, and I'll say it, it's way-finders.com, but anybody who goes to your website, the thing that stuck out to me immediately was this kind of these three tenets, and they kind of come together in this deep connection. So you have community, challenge, culture, and then where those overlap, you have deep connection, which is what you were talking about right now. And I'm just curious, when did the deep connection part of it become a priority to you? Like what was it that, you have this business, you're focusing on this business, and you have this adventure thing, and you're starting another adventure type business to get people outside and get this connection. But there's a clear focus. It's a very obvious focus in your website and all the language you use, in an emphasis on that connection part. And I'm just curious, did you see like a giant need for it? Was it something that you didn't see was being necessarily maximized? Is it something that you felt a gap in your life? We started the Kinetic Man because very much we believed that there was for men in particular, a huge gap in the relationships that we were created to have, right? Whether in our homes or with our friends. And so so it really resonated with me. And I'm just curious, what was the genesis of that?
I mean, again, this is one of those questions where I could go really far back, or I could go,
Please
few years
do.
back.
Please do.
I'll touch on a few different points in the journey. The first is, I mean, all of these things inform our decisions in life, right? Our childhood experiences, of course, inform how we bring ourselves to the world, how we interact with other people, our beliefs about the world. So I grew up an only child. Um, most of my schooling, continuing through high school, was was this desperate quest to fit in and belong somewhere, and never really feeling like I had that. Probably didn't really get that until university, and more so, and even more so when I got to Fernie. I finally kind of felt like I found my tribe there. And so a lot of my earliest years were just this memory of not quite fitting in anywhere and desperately wanting to belong and wanting those connections. A second experience that informs my work today, going back to 2004 to 2006, I went through this experience. I call it my long dark night of the soul. It was a just I was deep in depression for those two plus years. And what was really difficult and painful about that experience was that, we're talking almost 20 years ago. A lot more stigma around mental health. We have more open conversations about mental health and mental illness these days. Still a long way to go, but back then, it was worse. There was a lot more stigma, and so I carried a lot of shame about how I was feeling, and as a result, I tended to isolate myself, and so it was this vicious feedback loop of feeling lousy, wanting to pull back from other people, but then feeling lousier because I'm also isolating myself. And human beings, our brains are wired for connection with other people. So that was in the arc of my life. If you were to plot my feelings of connection to other people, that would have been like the absolute lowest point in my life. And and then the third experience I'll point to is just those last few years as I was scaling Sacred Rides, my previous company, was just like really having my foot on the gas, being focused, on growing this company. And and that, of course, that compromises a lot of things in your life. If you want to achieve that, it's very hard to achieve that without compromising other areas of my life. So it affected the quality of my marriage, my relationship with my kids, with my friends. I had less time left over to put into those things. And I remember waking up one day and looking at, we had this document, our one-page strategic plan, and on that document was our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal. And it was to be operating in 150 countries by 2021. And that goal had been set in 2016. I remember looking at that and just feeling this hollow feeling, like where the hell did that goal come from? And it has had no resonance for me whatsoever. And I could visually see, fast forwarding a couple of years, and we were on pace to hit that goal. And I could just see us hitting that goal, the 150th country, and then celebrating, maybe celebrating with the team for an afternoon, and then, okay, now what? And it's like I'm going to kill myself for years just to achieve this goal. And I realized so much of that was just a quest for validation and self-worth, and how empty and hollow that would be. And so all of those things inform what I'm doing, including this, this coaching program that I'm starting in January, is taking a different approach to write and connection. I've spent some time this week. I do 10 minutes of journaling every day, and I typically have a theme for each week that I try to just keep journaling about that one thing. And this week I've been journaling about life design, like really thinking about what is the life that I want to design, and then I return to my guiding principles or my core values, if you want to call them, but I prefer to call them guiding principles. And at the top of that is community and connection. And so that is the number one, filter for the decisions that I make. Is this going to move me into more community and more connection, or is it going to take me away from that? And that really informs the work that I do. The biggest part of what I do with Wayfinders is creating community and creating connection. And it's not just connection between people, but it's helping people connect to themselves. It's helping them connect to the natural world, helping them connect to a sense of calling, and much more than that. But that is really, if I look around at the world around me, there's just so much disconnection. People completely disconnected from themselves and who they are, disconnected from each other, disconnected from the natural world. All of these things that nourish us and sustain us, and that needs to be restored. And I'm trying to do my part, but also not repeat the mistakes of my last business, which were, I'm trying to focus on creating a lot of value for a small amount of people. And then
That's awesome.
and let the ripple effects of that ripple outwards. But I don't need to reach 1 billion people anymore. That was the ego talking.
I love that. I just want to acknowledge that. Well, one, if we disconnect from this, we can, the cell phone and the devices, we can more open up opportunities to connect with each other, which I think is an amazing thing. And we need to be self-aware of that. But I want to touch on one thing you said.
If I can just interject quickly, just about the phone thing, because I struggle with it just like everybody else does, and so do my kids. But when we were in Mongolia back in October, I took people on this 9-day journey through Western Mongolia, and there's no cell phone service, certainly no Wi-Fi. Like it's one of the most vast remote places on the planet, and it's spectacular, and the whole experience was amazing. But the thing that people kept mentioning and turning back to is the fact that everybody there
100%.
was disconnected. And for some people, it's the first time in years they'd experienced that. But to do it for 9 days in a row and to be surrounded by people who were in the same experience was like this experience of deep presence, and it was quite spectacular. That was as spectacular as the landscape was, just like being in full presence with a group of people.
That's awesome.
And
I love that.
and we have to.
Well, I was looking at your website.
Machines. Yeah, go ahead.
It's true. And I was looking at your website. You're going back in 2025. That's the trip I was actually looking at in 2025. You guys are doing Mongolia. And that was one of the things you highlighted about the trip is you're like, no Wi-Fi, no connectivity. I was like, ooh, I kind of like that, the idea of that trip. But you guys do have for our listeners, they do have a sat phone for emergency situations so that you guys are covered. So I did appreciate that. But I think I want to acknowledge one thing. And then just one following question, because I don't want to leave this topic before asking this question. I want to acknowledge the fact that you looked at that goal and you analyzed it and asked why. And I love that you did that, because most of us are very goal-oriented entrepreneurs driving towards a bottom line, 1 billion person reach, all these arbitrary numbers. I think arbitrary in many cases. And you step back and looked at impact over ego, and that I just want to acknowledge that's a huge step. You say it kind of like you kind of brushed over it, but I think that was a very, very significant thing that also is impacting lives that you can't even imagine, because you started something else as a result. So I love that. I want to acknowledge that. I want to ask 2 questions that I just don't want to leave this. You said you were effectively, I saw 2 ruts that you described: a depression rut, those 2 years of depression, and then effectively we'll just call it a busy business builder rut, right? And you talked about this rut of kind of neglecting the family. And again, one of the big reasons why Stuart and I started Kinetic Man is because we were very much in that rut as well, doing active duty military and real estate side gigs and different things. So I'm curious, how did you practically get out of those, right? Like, I think it's one thing I think a lot of us in those ruts, the biggest, most nefarious thing about them is getting out of them. Like, most of us, I think, are stuck. We get lulled into inaction, whether it's depression or even worse than inaction. We take action that's significantly impactful to our lives and our families. and then the business builder rut as well. Like what practically would you give to some of our listeners who are in that you can get out of it, right? Because I think
Hmm.
that it doesn't just happen. I'm sure it didn't just you like gave it like a Monday you woke up depressed, Tuesday you're like, oh wow, that was a sucky 2 year rut. Like I'm good now. I'm sure that's not the way it worked out for you.
Not quite, not quite. Yeah, well, I'll start there. The pivotal point with that was, as I mentioned, I was getting deeper and deeper into that hole. And the pivotal point was, and I hadn't really thought about self-harm, but the voice in my head was getting darker and darker, and it was trending in that direction. And I woke up one night, middle of the night, it was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and I woke up and as soon as I woke up, that voice was just screaming in my head. And it's basically it was this, on repeat, life sucks, it's never going to get better again. Life sucks, it's never going to get better again. And it was just really loud. My whole body started shaking. And, in hindsight, I was probably having a panic attack. And that went on, I remember just sitting up in my bed and like, holding my knees to my chest and just shaking. And this went on for, I don't know, half an hour or an hour. And I remember at one point saying, I don't think I can handle a whole night of this, let alone a lifetime like this. And that's where it looked like it was trending. And that's when the thoughts really started to turn dark. And that's when I started thinking about, well, I think there's only one way out of this. And somehow, thankfully, I don't know how I managed to fall asleep, but I managed to fall asleep. And if I hadn't, I probably would not be here today. And I woke up in the morning and I just, and it, the voice wasn't quite so intense, but the memory of that experience was very intense. And I just thought, I can't do this anymore. I have to stop this. And I went to see my doctor right away. He had been trying to get me to, commit to medication, and I'd kind of take it and I'd feel a little better. Then I'd quit cold turkey and I'd drop even farther. And I had this, the same shame I felt about myself. I felt shame about taking medication. And I just said, okay, this is not the final solution. This is not, there's a lot more to the solution than this, but this is part of the solution. I need to commit to this because some days I couldn't even get out of bed. And so I ended up saying to my doctor, I said, okay, I'm going to commit to my medication. Tell me what I need to take, what's the dosage, all that kind of stuff. What's my protocol? Committed to that. That was obviously that didn't, take effect immediately, but it took a few weeks, but it gave me enough of a foundation to build on so that I could actually get out of bed. I could go, I could go work out. I could go do some yoga. I could go see a therapist. I could, all these other things that I ended up doing that contributed to the long-term wellness plan. And so to this day, thankfully, I haven't gone back to that place since, and I haven't needed medication. But there's so much stigma around taking medication for mental illness, and I'm a big believer in it. And I also, at the same time, don't believe that's a very good long-term solution, right? You have to implement other strategies, long-term strategies into your life, like therapy. So that was that experience. But when I was in business builder mode, it was really just that experience of waking up one day and saying, this just feels completely meaningless, and then seeing it for what it is, which was just my ego, crying out for recognition and validation and all these things that I didn't get as a child or whatever was going on. I realized that I wasn't going to, no matter what I did, I could build $1 billion company. I wouldn't get what I needed that way. And I needed to find that sense of self-worth and validation inside. Um, that I mean, essentially, that was the decision that day was I need to get out of my company, and it took a while, like probably a couple of years at that point, or I don't know. But the first stage was like really removing myself from the business and building a lot of systems and process so that the team could run it without me. And so by the time I was done, I was down to 3 4 hours of meetings on Tuesdays, and that was it. And the company ran without me, which also coincidentally made it a lot easier to sell. And then when I decided, because again, there was an overlap between getting out of that business and really focusing on Wayfinders full time. But I knew when I wanted to build a proper company out of Wayfinders, I knew I did not want to repeat any of the mistakes of the past. So, I only run 2 events a year. I focus a lot of time and energy on just delivering an incredible product, delivering a lot of value to my customers, and always the primary motivation is like serving my community and my customers. And I've just discovered that when I do that, the financial success, the business success, all that stuff follows from that by putting them first and foremost. And and so, one of my guiding principles is leadership and service. And to me, leadership is service. And so I'm always trying to look at, what I'm doing through the lens of service, because if I make it just about me and my petty little, strivings and goals, then it's ultimately hollow and unfulfilling. So that's, you know, none of this is overnight stuff, but it's taken me a while to get really clear on who I am and what's valuable to me. But that process, and that's constantly asking the question. And you sort of touched on it, the why, asking why about your goal. But that's a starting point. Take it deeper, keep asking why. If you say like, hey, I want to buy a yacht next year. Well, why do you want to buy a yacht? Oh, because it's cool and it's fun and I want to go in the water. Okay, well, why do you want that? And then keep going down until you get at the core emotional or spiritual need or whatever. And that's when you discover if you're, these goals that we spend so much of our time and so much of our energy chasing, and we find out if they're actually meaningful or if they're just, surface crap.
Mike, after the conversation that you and I had on the phone, I actually told David about it. We take like walks around our building kind of during breaks, and just talk about whatever is on our mind. And I was telling him about our
And there's
conversation.
super dangerous walks. There's like lions and like it's all adventure to
That's
challenge
right.
ourselves.
That's right. That's right. Could get hit by another car in the parking lot or something like that. But
Yeah.
one of the things that really resonated with me is, going from your big scaling growth business to knocking it all down, and now Wayfinders, where you do 2 trips a year. That's it, right? And yeah, there's a lot, of preparation for that, and planning, and serving those that you serve. But one thing that stuck to me was you have repeat customers. Like you told me that, the people that go on these trips that go multiple times, like they're the same people over and over again. And your trips are booked, sold out multiple years in advance, correct? Like you're now scheduling for 2025, and I'm assuming that those are probably already getting booked. And the idea of, your business doesn't have to be grand, huge scaling growth, you just have like what I think what you said was you have 100 really great customers that keep on coming back over and over again. And you've built a community of people that you serve, and they find tremendous value out of what you provide. And that like really stuck with me, like we don't have to, flip 200 houses a year. We don't have to have a, 10,000 member mastermind. Like we don't have to have these huge, grandiose things. Sometimes it might be better to just own like 10 rental properties that are paid off free and clear. Maybe it's better to have just 100 members that keep on showing up every single time, and they get tremendous value and they talk about you all the time because it's so awesome. It really stuck with me. And I'm just not really a question, but like, how do you get that into more entrepreneurs' heads that you don't have to grow and scale and hustle and grind? And that might lead into, kind of the other stuff that you're doing, the entrepreneur's compass with what you're teaching.
Yeah, great question. I think it starts by asking people what is it that they want from running a company or from entrepreneurship. Um, a lot of people will tell you they want freedom. They want the freedom of running their own business. The problem is that there's this common saying: an entrepreneur is somebody who will work 80 hours a week so they don't have to work 40 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
But you don't have to work 80 hours a week, right? Of course, when you're starting out, you have to hustle and grind. You have to find your first customers, and it's not easy. I mean, some people have kind of figured out the roadmap for success and they have access to capital and all that kind of stuff. But for most of us, we have to hustle and grind in those early stages. But then when you get to the point where you can, pay yourself a nice salary, earn a nice living, then you have to ask yourself, okay, like if I'm going to scale this, what is my objective? What is it that I want from this business? And if you want more freedom, you're being an entrepreneur because you want more freedom, and then you're just like constantly putting your foot on the gas, and you're outraising your Series A, and then you're hiring another 20 people. That's gonna eat up your entire life, because unless you are really, 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 really good at scaling companies, and you've been there several times before, and you know how to do it and how to assemble the right team to do all that for you, you inevitably end up getting, even if you do know how to do those things, you end up getting crushed in the process because it just requires so much investment of time. And so if you want to invest all that time, you have to be clear on why you're doing it. And if you believe so deeply, down in your heart of hearts, that your product is incredible and you want to reach as many people as possible, that's great. And you can do that, and you can invest the time. And hopefully along the way you'll figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't, suck every minute of every day out of you. But the alternative, and this is a lot of what I teach, through the Entrepreneur's Compass program, is you can build a business that serves you, that serves the lifestyle you want to live, that serves a group of people and provides tremendous value to them, and doesn't have to, can pay you a nice salary. You don't have to work too much. I currently work about 15, 20 hours a week is my typical average work week. Pay myself a very nice salary. I have, I have money in the bank to cover operating expenses for the next year and a half. And I run the financial ship very tightly and carefully. And that's another part of my model, is like really having good financial acumen. And and so I don't, my previous business, I was constantly waking up in the middle of the night, just stressed. Am I going to be able to make payroll next month? And where's the next investor going to come from? And all this kind of stuff. And I needed all that money because, I was always trying to expand and more and open up the next destination, this one and that one. And again, it's like getting really clear on what it is that you want. And if you want freedom, if you want to feel like you have impact, um, for me, I'm like you said, I have about 100 raving fans, and I connect with them regularly. I have lunches, I have coffees, I have phone calls. Over the course of a year, I'm going to connect with almost every single member at least once or twice. And I just love being able to connect with them, learn about their lives, learn, what are they striving for, what keeps them up at night, and hopefully provide some value. And I think there's a lot of value that can be provided in the context of community and people helping each other out. So, those are all very conscious decisions I made in how I wanted to build this business. And thankfully, I had this beautiful roadmap of not what not to do with my previous business. So it was just like, okay, I'll just do the opposite of all those things.
So what is the Entrepreneur's Compass? What's that all about? What are the guiding principles? What do you teach, and who's it for?
Yeah, so it's really, taking everything I've learned in 25 plus years of entrepreneurship and distilling it into, I call it a community-based coaching program. So it's not just me, sharing my wisdom, but it's taking place within the context of community. Everybody who participates in the program gets put in a small group with a few other entrepreneurs, and you meet monthly with them to support each other, hold each other accountable, stuff like that. The four core aspects of the program is building a business that's aligned. So it's aligned with who you are and who you want to be in the world. And it's an expression of that. It's easy. So putting in systems and processes and stuff like that so that it's easy to run. You're focused on, the stuff that you get joy from, the tasks that provide a lot of value to the company. It's appealing. So it's like a magnet for the ideal customer. And you're not trying to be everything to everyone. So you're really honing in on who your ideal customer is. And the final piece of it is profitable. And so instead of just focusing on revenue and focusing on growth, because that often becomes decoupled from profit. And so in my last business, and the people around me, this is so common. Expenses go up like this, or sorry, revenue goes up like this, and expenses go up even more steeply. And most people don't know how to manage those two things, right? And and then profitability goes in the toilet, cash flow goes in the toilet, and you wake up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, I can't make payroll tomorrow. What am I going to tell the staff? And so when we focus on profit and cash flow over revenue, then it just makes a much easier business to run. And then if you've got the business model dialed in, that it's profitable, you have positive cash flow month over month, then you can put your foot on the gas and you can grow it. But most people, if I look back at my previous business, after I brought in all that investor money and bank loans and all that kind of stuff, I had so much money coming, outside money coming in, and I was hiring people left, right, and center, and just um, growing the company. And then every year, we'd hit kind of the fall or off season. We still had trips running through the winter, but it was definitely quite a bit slower. And we'd run into cash crunches. And after about 2 or 3 years of that, I started looking into the business model, and it's like, holy crap, like isn't anybody minding the chicken coop here? The chickens are going crazy. Like our operating expenses were crazy high, our margins were terrible, all this and all that stuff that you don't even have to worry about because you've got all this outside money coming in. And so, I had to completely redo the business and fix the business model. And so with Wayfinders, I started with the end goal in mind and building the model around that rather than figure it out as you go.
But and I love it. Before we hit record, you said this is an alternative way to look at it. And then obviously, if you go to the Entrepreneur's Compass on the website, the byline is the subtitle is an alternative to the hamster wheel. Excuse me. And I just love it's fascinating to me because you talk in there a lot about arbitrary numbers and these goals, and it's fascinating to me that so many of us are wrapped up into these ideas of what entrepreneurship, business building should be. But at the end of the day, you just summed it up, right? You want positive cash flow, something that can sustain your livelihood. And also, I think we don't talk about it very often, but most of us started a business from a position of passion, or we started a business from a place of, I really love this thing. And very quickly, we lose focus and it becomes this thing that we really despise. Like we were like, oh my gosh, I can't sleep at night. Can I make payroll? Like it turns into something very different. And so what I love about your coaching program, at least what you described thus far, and has me completely intrigued, is this idea that you can have it all. You just have to really take some of the ambiguity out of it and get some clarity behind what it is you're truly pursuing, and then recognizing if I don't hit 50% growth and 10 million in revenue, all these things, like I can still be very, very happy and successful. I just have to redefine what that success looks like. And so I think it's fascinating that you've done that. And I also just want to express my gratitude. I'm very grateful that people like you, successful entrepreneurs, can take a step back and give that alternative point of view, right? To help to help us who don't have as much experience, to be like, wait, let me question that. Do I really want, I'm already thinking now, I'm like, how much, for the Kinetic Man, do I really want it to be like a super scaled out thing? Like, what is the thing that we want? And I want men to be impacted, to be better in their homes and in their places of business. That's really what I want. So does that have a number tied to it? I don't know. It's just a fascinating idea, and it's a fascinating concept that I think we should.
Well, I can
dig
speak
into.
to that. I can speak to that. I think it's possible to have all of that. You can have a really fulfilling business that doesn't overwhelm you, that you feel aligned with, that's profitable, and you can have the growth and the rapid growth. In my experience, and I've coached hundreds of people, most people um, most people focus on the growth first, and then it's kind of figure it out as I go. And and excuse me. My approach is let's build the whole ecosystem, the whole structure around this thing so that the business feels aligned with who you are and that you're focusing on the aspects of the business that you feel really aligned with, the tasks that light you up and provide a lot of value. And the rest of the stuff, you eliminate it, you automate it, you delegate it, whatever that may be. That it's, you're focusing on the right customer and your ideal customer, and you're not trying to be everything to everybody, and you've got the business model figured out for profit and cash flow. And then if you got all that stuff figured out, and then you have a roadmap for scale and growth, then you can do all that stuff. But most people tend to just scale before they have all that stuff figured out, and then shit breaks along the way, right? And in order, like, what really bugs me is like, Inc. magazine, they have the Inc. 5000 every year. I think it's 5,000, and it's a list of the 5,000 most rapidly growing companies in America, or maybe it's North America, I don't know. And that is such a terrible metric of success, because in my experience, and I have friends who run, billion-dollar companies, and I have friends who run small companies, and I've seen everything in between. But the ones that tend to scale the fastest usually crash the hardest. And if you were to, I'll bet you if you were to take Inc. 5000 from 5 years ago and do a little audit of how many of those companies are still in business, how many of those companies have had a mass layoff or several rounds of mass layoffs in the process. And we treat this, these mass layoffs as just, it's a normal part of doing business. That's really just it's a byproduct of building businesses the wrong way, right? And if you do it the right way, like my business right now, like I managed to get through COVID just fine because I had lots of cash in the bank. I ran a carefully, I was in the travel business, but COVID completely shut me down. But I had a small customer base that was really loyal, loved what I did, and they were just like, "Don't worry about it." No, nobody asked for a refund. They said, "We'll just do the events when it's time to do that." And and so, if I could sustain another, knock on wood, but I could sustain another massive shock. I wouldn't, if I had, I only have an assistant, that's my only employee, but like I wouldn't have to lay anybody off. I wouldn't have to make major adjustments to my business because I run it a very different way. And, but if you, like I said, if you do things the right way, you can have both. You can have a beautiful business that serves you and you can grow it. You just got to put in the time and put in the reps first to do that, right?
Yeah, and I love that you just said you have one assistant and you can make it through. And I think a lot of us, this was not me. I'm just caveating for others, not me. But I think a lot of people are like, oh, one employee, like I want a business, I want a business that is a bunch of people and a large impact, all this kind of stuff. And I think what struck me when you're talking about that is you probably experience more joy through your business in the connections that you make and the impacts that you're having on those fans and even on your assistant, but you also get to do this amazing, you're executing a business plan that has you traveling the world and really living the life that you want to live while also making a very nice living from it. And so I would argue, I think it really emphasizes for me, get absolute clarity on what you want your life to look like. And you said it earlier, your design your life, get absolute clarity and make those things build from that place of clarity. Because like I can't even imagine how much fun it is to, like if I'm thinking about future businesses, I'm like, okay, if people will pay me to go teach them how to fly fish and we'll talk business on a river, like my dreams have all come true, right? Like that to me would be the most ridiculous
You could
thing,
probably make that happen.
but you probably can make it happen, right? But again, it requires clarity and it requires you to be able to really refine what it is you truly want to do. And so I absolutely love it. It's so empowering. This conversation is so empowering for me because it really takes, I was talking to someone recently about the Kinetic Man, and he's like, man, I just want to 10x my business. And I was like, you just want to 10x your business? He's like, yeah, I just want to 10x it. Like, that's my next goal. I was like, cool. Like what,
Why?
like, what does that mean? Like, I don't even like, I was like, maybe like a year ago, I'd have been like, so cool. Like, that sounds awesome. Like, let's do it. But like, I don't even know what that means anymore. I don't even know and I don't even know why it's important. Like, is that really important? And so I think as we start asking these more profound questions, what is exciting to me is you can absolutely create you're living proof of creating businesses that are, like you said, to start, people are paying me to ride a mountain bike. Like, that's ridiculous. Dream come true. And just keeping that vision and building a business to that is can be something that's extremely fulfilling and also just feeds you personally, right? I mean, very selfishly, it just feeds you personally from an experiential standpoint.
Yeah. Well, and then something you said just early on there, you talked about like people wanting to manage, lead a big team. Most of the time, that is another one of those ego-based goals. It's like I want to feel like I'm the head of this big, there's 100 people all reporting to me, and I'm the
I'm
grand
important.
poobah. I'm the grand poobah. I ran a big team at my previous company, and I hated it. I don't like managing people, and I don't like being in meetings. And when you manage large teams, you end up in a lot of meetings. So, I have three standing meetings a week. I have two 1 hour meetings with my assistant, and I have one actually, no, it's only once a month. I have a once a month 1 hour events call with my assistant and with this other woman who helps me with events. That's it as far as, meetings I have to take in my company. The rest of them are, like I said, coffees, lunches, calls with my members. And that's like those meetings are deeply nourishing to me. I love them. I love connecting with them. And they're also really valuable from a business standpoint, right? Because I learn how to provide value to them. They learn more about what my goals are and how they can, help me out, stuff like that. None of that ecosystem would not exist if I was managing 100 people. And and yeah, you can hire a chief operating officer and they're the one who has all the meetings, but I haven't seen that model work that great where the CEO just kind of, is kicking back in a hammock and the COO is just handling all the stress. Usually gets delegated up.
Like this conversation has been incredibly valuable for the two of us, and I know it's going to be valuable for a lot of our listeners. I really appreciate it. It's got my brain stirring on the directions that we're going to take our company, and it's exciting. One last question.
Yeah.
What's the best place that you've been to in the world on some of these trips? Like favorite place that you've taken your Wayfinders?
Man, I've been asked this question so many times before, and it's like, which of your children is your favorite?
Yeah, I can answer that easily. No, I'm just joking.
I mean, each of them is special for very different reasons. The Amazon is very different than Greenland, of course. But if you were to tell me, hey, you get to go, you get to go, it's your last trip ever, and you get to go to one of the places that you've been to for a month, I would probably choose Uganda.
Wow.
And I've been there, southwestern Uganda. I've been there 3 times, and I've run 2 events there. And it's this combination of like this incredible jungle, like really thick. Um, it's called windy impenetrable forest, and it's pretty thick jungle. And then you've got half of the world's mountain gorillas in that forest, along with all this other wildlife. But what makes it magical are the communities around it and the people there. There's so much joy there, and people are just constantly spontaneously breaking out into song and dance. And it's just, for me, it's a place that's like it's it's a really beautiful expression of the human spirit. Uganda is one of the poorest countries on earth, but the people there are just so incredible and so welcoming, and they dance so much and they sing so much. And every time I'm around them, it just completely lifts my spirit. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's got a special place in my heart.
That's really cool, man. How do people find out about Wayfinders and learn about Entrepreneur's Compass, and where do we send them?
Yeah, the website is way-finders.com, and all the stuff's there up in the top menu. Next available adventure isn't until October of 2025, which is a return to Mongolia.
That's awesome. And Entrepreneur's Compass, you're starting that next year in 2024. Is that correct?
Yeah, that gets underway mid-January.
Cool.
I'll do another intake in July.
Awesome. Well, we'll put your website on the show notes and we'll send people there. This has been a blast. I really appreciate you showing up and having this conversation with us. It's exciting. David, you
Thank
got
you,
anything
guys.
else?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Super, as Stu said, mine is going crazy and just really insightful conversation. And I really just want to thank you and honor you for what you do and your clarity and what you're bringing the world, the value that you add. It's a beautiful thing. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation and the thoughtful questions.
Absolutely. Guys and gals, reach out to Mike. Check out wayfinders.com and book Mongolia 2025. See you.
See you.
Hey, before we let you go and tackle the day, we wanted to tell you about a new product coming out called the Manifesto. It's a newsletter. It's free. It comes out twice a month, and we give actionable steps, insights, and inspiration to help you on your journey to becoming a better man. We aim to be the highest value per minute email in your inbox every time. So go check it out. You can go to thekineticman.com/newsletter. Again, that's thekineticman.com/newsletter and sign up for the Manifesto. It is going to be awesome. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Kinetic Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
Yeah, and on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.